Let's take a few minutes out and go over a major concept called bonding and rapport, and the importance of it and how it relates to the patient's relationship and what kind of bonding and rapport. There's very specific bonding and rapport. Some people, very few people are actually good at it naturally. I myself was not. I actually had to study it and I actually had to learn some techniques and I had to apply the techniques to increase my ability of bonding and rapport. I had my office manager was excellent at bonding and rapport. And I found out when I studied, I was like, why does she just gets along with everybody? Everybody likes her. I'm like, so I just studied her, like, what's going on? What is she doing psychologically that why everybody likes her? And not just because she was friendly, but she did a major concept unconsciously. She did a concept called the okay, not okay principle. And it was a big book written in the 70s, a bestseller. And we'll go into that. But basically, easily made you feel better about yourself than her. She made you more okay than her. And she did that naturally without even knowing it, which is very, very rare. And so she just everybody liked her. All the doctors that came and trained with her wanted to take her with her to be their office manager. You know, she's just that kind of person. So let's go into some of these major concepts that we want to pay attention to with bonding and rapport. So obviously, and by the way, there's very specific things we do with our patient interaction that we train. It's actually trained in. So we train in some bonding and rapport techniques, and you'll see that as we come through here. But it's good to be highly aware. First, you have to analyze yourself and look at these techniques and go, well, where am I? Am I doing that? Am I aware of that? Am I just totally oblivious to that? And believe me, I've got a lot of doctors that are oblivious to how they communicate. Sometimes I'm actually shocked when I say to a doctor, I say, like I might say to a doctor, I say, are you aware you've got low tone scale? And they're shocked. They're like, no. It's like nobody told them or nothing happened in their life. I'm like, or like, are you aware you're a little loud naturally? Are you aware you're a little offensive naturally? I mean, some of us have these little tweaks, and I certainly had to modify my behavior. I'd have lost 50% of my patients if I'd have just walked in there because I'm just more abrupt and abrasive naturally. So I had to really study bonding and rapport and apply some of these strategies, uh, really just to not be as abrasive, not be as confrontational, and just all for a better relationship with the patient. Okay, so let's cover some of these techniques. So it's to help them feel okay with themselves and comfortable with you. So what's the purpose of bonding and rapport? It wants to increase trust, increase confidence, help to decrease defenses and decrease uncertainty. That's the purpose of bonding and rapport. So, and there's some things I'm going to point out some examples as we go through this. Now, you do have to be proactive. If you have some things that are natural, that's great. I sometimes when I'm doing analysis with doctors and a doctor has a natural kind of style of communication with them, I make sure to point that out. I said, I want you to wear this is naturally and this is really good. You need to make sure you're aware of it. You continue it. Because I always say what you want to do is you want to find your strengths and you want to maximize your strengths. And then you want to try to, you definitely want to know your weaknesses and then try to work on your weaknesses. But usually it's your weaknesses that be problems, not your strengths. Usually that's the case. So the patient relationship should be based on commerce, not friendship. And oh my God, is this a huge concept with doctors coming out of school? And they go for like. And you cannot go for like becomes a byproduct. So I'm going to try to get into it a little deeper because it sounds a little more metaphysical. Like, what are you talking about? But you cannot go for like in a doctor-patient relationship. Now you can still have friendly and they can like you, all that, but there's a huge difference with it being the byproduct versus that's the mode that you're going after. And most doctors don't even know that's the mode they're going after. They're just kind of weak. And so it's really from weakness is what it is. So I'll go into that specifically. You want to deliver a good service experience. We'll make sure we talk about what services. Everybody thinks they give good service. And when you go down the checklist of what's the definition of good service, half of them don't. And they don't even know they don't give. They got crappy service and they don't even realize it. Because they're not even fulfilling like the core components of good service. Good service does not mean liking you. It does not mean befriending you. If you do that and you leave all the components required in service, that's bad service. So deliver a good service. Go for respect, not friendship. And you always go for respect, not friendship with the patient. Friendship is the byproduct. So lack of conviction, and I see this all the time with doctors that'll go for like lack of conviction, confidence, and procedures are the number one reason doctors go for like and to befriend the patient. Let me say that again. Lack of conviction, lack of confidence, and especially not knowing the procedures are the number one reason doctors go for like and try to befriend the patient. In other words, there's a certain guidance patients expect and want to know consciously, more so unconsciously when they interact with you. Like when I go somewhere that I don't know, I expect certain things to happen, but I expect that person to lead me through them because I don't know his industry, his business, his location, his layout. I don't know it. So I need him to lead me through it instead of just befriending me. So that's the number one reason I see doctors go for like, and what's some of the biggest examples of that is when the doctor's spending way too much time with them talking about non-clinical topics. And it typically happens in the treatment room and in the therapy bank. And I see that's when doctors are going for life. And that's the greatest way to destroy the relationship is when you go for life. That's when they will only come for symptom care. That's it. And they will not even be satisfied with your service because they're not getting the core components of service. Okay? In other words, patients like to be led. They like to be directed. They like to be informed. They like to be allowed to make the decision. They like to be treated with respect. See, these are all components of service. Now, in addition to that, we have to deliver a certain amount of information when we do it. We like them also to respect our time, our money, and we especially want certain information when we come through. What's my problem? Can you help? How long is it going to take to feel better? How much is it going to cost? See, these are all the things of service that we expect, not just sitting around talking and being friendly. In other words, there's a lot of direction moving a patient. If you're going to be highly efficient, professional, good service. And what's great about it is when you get respect versus like, that's when they stay and pay for care. And the byproduct is that they just like you. That's just the natural byproduct, but you never go for like. You're always going for the service factors, being friendly, recognizing them, appreciating and approving, leading them to the next step, leading them through your facility because they don't know, leading them to the next step because they don't know, allowing them, giving them the information, allowing them to make the decision. That's being enlightened. Allow them to make the decision. Treat them with courtesy and respect as you move them through. Allow them to make decisions. Treat them with courtesy and respect. and then deliver the components that they want. What do they come for? Well, they came for, what's my problem? Can you help? How long is it going to take to feel better? How much is it going to cost? See, that's called good service. Now, I can be friendly when I do it, and I will be. But when you don't do that, when you're not moving them through that cycle, and now you're just talking to them, that's when you're trying to befriend them. That's the clue. You're just trying to befriend them and going for life. And the rule is, the more that they go for life, the more that they'll like you as opposed to respect you, the quicker they're going to leave your practice. That's the rule. And so one of the rules that I had with my doctors is they were only allowed to talk about clinical subjects in the room when they did the adjustment, with the only exception when they walked into the room and just introduced themselves and said, "Hi, Mary, how you doing today?" That's it. Otherwise, they weren't allowed to go and talk about it, because that's not what the patient came from. The patient didn't come to talk about anything else. It's not why they drove 20 minutes here, drove 20 minutes back, and they're spending $50. That's not why they're here. So, and then it was the clinical experience with information leading them through, letting them know it's finished, and so you're very efficient, and then letting them know it's done and leaving. That's called a great experience. Not sitting in the room talking to them. And one of the killers is when you put patients on therapy and you sit there and you talk to them. You stay in there and you talk to them. That's why I made my doctor. There's nothing good that's going to happen with that unless you're going to go for a referral, unless you're talking about getting a referral. But your notes should be done. Your soap notes should be done. There's no reason why a doctor should be talking to a patient while they're on therapy. There's no reason. It's all bad. There's nothing good that's going to come of that. And that's why my doctors were not allowed to stand at the table when the patient was on therapy, because it's a form of weakness. When the patient goes to the therapy, the doctor just kind of continues on. And now he's talking about anything. He's not talking about the clinical experience anymore. He's talking about the ball game the night before, the weather, whatever, the festival that's in town this weekend, or, And that's not why they go to the doctor. That's not why they go to the dentist. That's not why they go to the optometrist. I always say all the time, they're not there to buy a friend. They've got friends, and they don't need to pay money to have friends. They're there for a professional, respectful relationship, and they're there to get certain things done. What's my problem? Can you help? See, and to be done in a respectful, kind, friendly way. That's why they came, not to be a friend. So those are real common examples, and it happens a lot with new doctors that have low confidence. Especially there's a huge, especially in chiropractic, there's a huge misperception between quantity and quality. New doctors think the longer they spend with a patient, the better it is. They think that actually is meaningful, and it's not. What's meaningful is you delivered the service. You were friendly. You informed them. You allowed them to make a decision, and you delivered the service. So it's no different if I walked in the room, said, "Hi, how we doing?" And then I turned the light switch. Let's say the objective's turning the light switch on. Would only took me a half a second to turn the light switch on. The light's on. If that was the objective, we're done. It's over. I don't have to sit around and talk anymore. The light switch is on. And doctors don't realize that, because that's the meaning. An adjustment takes 1 to 3 minutes. That's it. And some doctors feel bad about it. They feel like I didn't spend enough time with the patient. It's not a factor of time. It's, did you turn the light switch on? If you turn the light switch on, leave the room. The light switch is on. Go do the next thing that you got to do. It's not about time. It's about quality. And it's very difficult to get this concept across. Low conviction, low esteem doctors that don't know procedures, they will naturally do the wrong thing. They'll just sit in there and talk. And it'll be 10, 15, 20 minutes. I mean, that can't happen. You can't have somebody in a room for 15, 20 minutes at 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And the bad news is if you do that because nobody else is around, if somebody else does come around, now when you don't do it, they see it as you're cheating them. You spend 20 minutes talking to them every day. Well, this day you're not. You only spend 10 minutes. See, now you gave bad service. And that's why we always say the first adjustment, which is called the honeymoon visit, that first adjustment, the experience of that first adjustment should be the quickest that you've ever give out of all of them. You're setting the stage of what's going to happen. You turn the switch on and you get out of the room and you go, it's over. You're setting the stage and you tell them, yep, that'll do it. That'll do it for today. So that's when I see a huge doctors going for like big mistake. Those doctors never do well in practice. So we want the patients to feel okay or good about themselves and their experience with us. That's what we want. We want that feeling that when they walk out, they have a good feeling and they're thinking, I'm in the right place. That's the feeling. Well, that feeling is created by doing several things. Some very specific several things. And it doesn't take much along the doctor-patient relationship when they enter the office from the time they get on the phone to the time they come in to disrupt that. It doesn't take much at all. You could not pay attention to somebody for 2-3 minutes and it's very offensive. It's very offensive. So 3 components let's pay attention to: elements of communication. We pay a lot of attention to this when we analyze patient education videos. Active listening skills, we pay a lot of attention to that. And primary sensory dominance. How does that person communicate? So let's go into those a little bit. Elements of communication. Of course, we should be definitely aware 7% is the verbal is the absolute worst way of communicating. That's why we always want to use a whiteboard or props or a chart. I mean, everything you want to do when you communicate with patients, you want to include a visual. Tone is 38%. So we pay a lot of attention to volume, speed, how fast the doctor's talking relative to the patient, because that'll drive a wedge in the relationship. Whether you're too slow, the patients have certain perceptions of you. If you're just kind of slow and you kind of meander your way along, that gives negative perceptions, not good perceptions. And if you're too fast and you don't know what you're doing and the patient can't keep up, then that keeps a little bit of a problem. Now you're disconnecting the bonding and rapport because you're going too fast. Now the person just wants to get away from you. So that's why you got to pay so much attention when we talk to the patient about where's the patient's tone? Where's the patient's speed? And you have to go to match that. You got to either increase your tone or decrease your tone, increase your speed or decrease your speed, depending on that patient. That's why we got to pay attention to it. We'll pay attention to body language. This is huge when we're talking to patients, especially if they show closed down body language. Their arms are crossed, their legs are crossed, they're leaning back, their heads off to the side. All of those are rejection body languages. So we engage the patient. We first see them, and then we act on them. We'll engage the patient verbally and physically to move that body language. We want them up. We want their arms open. A lot of times I'll even ask them to stand up, and I'll do something with them, like check their neck or their back. And the only reason I had them stand up is to get them out of the defensive body position. Eye contact is obviously very big. Are they looking at you in the eye when you're talking to them? We already talked about posture, facial expression. We read facial expression. These are the things you can't see when you're in a state of conscious competence. When you're still trying to think of what you need to be saying, you can't even see this. You can't see speed or tone or body expressions, or if they're with you, or you can't even see it because you're trying to think of what you need to say next. This is why it's so important that you go into the unconscious competence phase in the material you're delivering. As soon as you do that, that's when you'll be able to pay attention to who you're talking to. That's when you'll be able to act on how they're acting and reacting. And that's when the quality of the relationship skyrockets. So facial expressions, position of arms and hands, moving forward. You can't just now, the new doctors who don't know how to communicate, a lot of times they don't even see this. This is happening and they don't even see it. There's like a bowl in a china shop. They don't see it. And then when they start learning this, they start seeing it, but then they don't know how to stop it. They don't know a technique of how to stop the person from being defensive or resistant. And of course, that's what we teach in all of our patient education. All of these are techniques that we teach in communication with our patient education. And then, of course, there's active listening. Well, that's the feedback. Active listening, ask questions or comment on the message. Boy, that's a huge one. I said that's the #1 problem that I have when I teach doctors. It's increasing their active listening skills. It's amazing how much doctors, when they come out, are not even hearing what the patient's saying, and they're just rambling on and not even getting half the information they asked for. So active listening is really hearing what the patient is or is not saying in their own words. So ask questions or comment, and that's what we'll do. That's some ways to do that is reinstate their own words or paraphrase. So active listening skills, I'll ask them, I'll just repeat what they said. Is that right? Make sure you hear what you're saying. But active listening skills is one of the biggest skills you can attain. It's being a very good listener to what is really being said and matching it to their tone, their speed, and their body language. That's called great active listening skills. That you have to be proactive to do that. You got to be aware of it. You got to be proactive of it. And it changes your life because you'll be able to communicate with anybody. I've got excellent active listening skills, and I know what people are saying or not saying, not just with their words, but with their tone and their speed and their body language, their facial expressions. And then I know how to stop it or start it or move it forward or engaging them. Those are all techniques to increase the bonding and rapport. So why? It engages participation and increases commitment, shows you care. That's why. Bonding and rapport is everything. You can mess up a lot of things, but if you got good bonding and rapport, they'll stick with you. Now, don't confuse bonding and rapport with you going for like. Don't confuse that. They're not the same. 3 types of persons, primary, secondary. So your listening gives a chance to clarify, gives resonant, forces you to listen. So it says 3 types of persons, primary, sensory, dominant. So a lot of people are more sight-based. So, we pay a lot of attention to the personality profiles and how we interact with people. Well, we want to pay some attention to their types of sensory dominance. Are they more of a visual person? Are they more of an auditory person? Are they more of a kinetic? And you've seen this before. Kinetic people, a lot of touchy-feely people. Those are usually off the chart when you get those. Communicate with them by their primary mode. So that's what creates trust, decreases defenses, creates familiarity, creates security. So the insight into how they see the world, visual, see your point, paint me a picture, show me the way. So these are visual words for visual people. See your point, paint a picture, show me the way. Those are some words to be using for visual people. We just want to be aware, not just of personalities, of tone, of speed, the words. I mean, we need to really ratchet up of being a highly effective communicator. Auditory, doesn't sound right. Don't have to say it again. Come through loud, you come through loud and clear, good to hear. Kinesthetic, I feel you're not listening. I feel a bit confused, like a slap in the face. Do you sense what I'm saying? So why? It helps determine if they're with you. Do they accept what you said? Is there any hesitancy? Is there any resistance? Do they have any questions? It creates a good professional relationship is what it does. When you not only know the service factors, so that's giving them information, allowing them, leading them, giving them information, allowing them to make the choice, treating them with courtesy and respect, and allow them to make the choice, lead them through the system. What's my problem? Can you help? How long is it going to take to feel better? How much is it going to cost? All of these are parallels. We're paying to their personality in addition to that, because that's how we're going to communicate with them. Are they a sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic, choleric? That's a major way of communicating with them. Same with, are they auditory? Are they kinesthetic? Are they more visual? So there's plenty of ways of paying attention to somebody to increasing and accentuating the relationship. And it all starts with active listening. Are you aware of this? Are you aware that we need to move the person from here to here? You know, a clean example that I say when I go into the room, because we monitor all these things when we evaluate patient education and communication. But one of the clean examples is when the doctor walks in the room and introduces himself. We just do the icebreaker. Hey, Mary, did you have any trouble getting here? Well, that alone, by the time you're done with the icebreaker, the doctor should look at the patient, how they're dressed, their body hygiene, their jewelry, their body posture, and how they talk. And you should know what type of personality that person is right there. And that's how you're going to communicate with. And then that's why we say the very first thing you go for is a third party connection. You don't start on chief complaints. You don't start doing an exam. You go for a third party connection. Why? It's called bonding and rapport. And that's what we'll say. Hey, Mary, before we get started, do you mind if I ask you, how did you hear about us? And we go down several levels. We'll go 2, 3, or 4 resistances. In other words, I'm going to keep digging until we have something similar in common. It's called bonding and rapport. Then I'll go. So I'll go, yeah, do you know of anybody? Say, how'd you hear about us? Say there's nobody. Then I'll ask, well, does any of your family members or friends come here? So that's the second resistance. Now, nothing there. I'll ask any about coworkers. Third resistance. What line of work you in? See if there's anything I can relate to with the line of work. But I need to go further than that. I said, you have kids? Are they in school around here? That's especially important if you have kids and your kids are in school. Parents bond real quick with kids in school. That's what that's about. So the very first objective is bonding and rapport before you start moving forward. And it continues in all these ways. So we're going to pay attention to leading them. We're moving them. They're not going to move themselves. They're in a foreign area. So we have to physically move them. They're in a foreign environment. We have to mentally move them. We got to lead them. That's what they expect. They expect to be led. And then given the information and the options and allowed to be made the choice. That's what they expect. That's what we give them. That's why we say that's the points of service. Okay, so give them information, treat them, lead them, give them information, treat them with courtesy and respect, allow them to make the decision. That's the definition of service. And then you need to lead them through your office into the consultation, how to lead the consultation, the very specific points of the consultation. We don't just jump in there, put our hands on them and do an exam. We start with the human stuff, the bonding and rapport. So there's several factors that we're asking and interacting with before we even ask confirm their chief complaint. And it's for bonding and rapport reasons, referral reasons, body language, decision maker. I mean, we're getting a lot of information out of this person in the first 1 or 2 questions we ask. That's going to tell us how we're going to relate to that person with personality, speed, tone, decision maker. This is increasing your ability to communicate effectively with your patients. And especially learn not do the things that they don't want. Well, what do they not want? They don't want to come in there and not be led and just be taken forever to do one thing. They don't want to come in there and you talk about them about everything else, but why they're there. And your office is not by a friend. You're friendly to them as you move them through, but you got to be moving them through. And you have to be informing them, not talking about the ball game. And when you're doing something clinical, you never talk about anything else. Never. That diminishes what you're doing tremendous. I see that all the time. Doctors adjusting the patient, talking about something not even related to the adjustment. It's valueless what you're doing. You're just showing me it's valueless. Time you start that clinical experience, time you end it should be nothing but that clinical experience if you say anything. And the same with therapy. Worst thing you could do is just sit around and talk. That's why all my doctors were required to leave. They were not allowed to be in that therapy bay because there's nothing but downside. They would try to befriend them. And when you try to befriend the patient, it's all down. There's no upside. It's all down. It's all upside when you treat them professionally. You give them good service. In other words, all those factors. You treat them with courtesy and respect. You lead them through your office. You inform them. You allow them to make the decision. You communicate them more effectively with personality, their tone, their speed. You give them the information. What's the problem? Can you help? How long is it going to take? And what's it going to cost? That's the experience they want.